All right, so today in our almost last project, what we're going to be doing is creating a sports logo using Gravit. So a lot of times logos are going to be designed in a vector graphics program because they need to be resized. Sometimes they're going to be like really small on a hat or like a chest of a jersey. Sometimes they're going to be really big on a billboard or like the side of a stadium. So there's all sorts of different reasons that you might have a logo. Now we're going to create a very generic one, but we're going to introduce you to a number of concepts in vector graphics programs. So I'm going to bounce over to my graphics program right here. So I'm in Gravit, and this is what the final product looks like. We're going to be creating very generic. I don't even have a city. It just says, regional sports team. The second project is going to be to create one for a fictitious sports team that you want sort of following the same process. So this is our end result. I'm going to show you how we get there. So in Gravit, we're going to create a new design, and we're going to go down to the social media presets. We're going to go to Instagram 1080 by 1080 in pixels, and that will give us a nice blank canvas. Notice up here in this tabbed view, I can go back to the original one right here. I'm just gonna go ahead and make sure I save that project so I don't lose anything. I'm gonna go back to this untitled area right here. Now what we're gonna do is start off by using the rectangle tool, and just with the default settings, we're gonna create a rectangle like so. Now for this project, I don't care about exact dimensions. Now ordinarily, we definitely would, but since we're creating something original, there really is no correct. We just want it to look and feel right. So I'm going to center this right here on my canvas. Notice right here I have my alignment tools, so this way I can just get it centered. But I also want it to be a little bit lower down in here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an ellipse, and I'm going to hold shift so that it's a perfect circle, and I want it to look right like so, and I can use sort of the auto align features that are built in. Now we want to do, if you look right here, is we want to put a stroke on the outside of these shapes. But there's a step that we have to take before we do that, because if I just select both of these shapes, and then I go to borders right here, and I just start adding, I think I have like a 25 pixel border, you see that I have these sort of two shapes, and I don't want this sort of intersecting thing going on right here. So there's a step that we're going to take. So the first thing that we're going to do, because you'll notice in the final project, this is sort of cantilevered in like so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this rectangle, and I'm going to convert this to a path. So that's going to sort of change it from like just a rectangle to a path, which is going to give me the ability to take my sub select tool, and then I can click on one of these corners, and I'm going to just sort of nudge it in. If I hold shift, it's going to go I think 10 times what you do when you don't hold shift. I'm going to nudge that in twice, so 1 2 and then 1 2. Now notice that this is filled in and these are all hollow. That's how I know that I have sub selected as opposed to sort of like otherwise, just grabbing the entire rectangle. All right, so now I'm going to go back to my pointer tool. I'm going to select both of these objects, and I'm going to use a feature up here that is going to create a compound shape. So it's basically going to merge these two shapes together. I can sort of still see the outline of where they once were, but this blue path sort of shows me that these two shapes have now become one. Now, once I've done this, I realize I want this to be a little bit further. I want this to be out a little bit further, so I can just go ahead and grab my sub select tool. I can select just this particular area. I'm going to shift left arrow one time, and I'm going to shift right arrow another time. Now I'm going to create another rectangle, and that's going to be where I write sports team, as you saw down in this area right here. All right, so for that, I'm going to simply create a rectangle like so. Now it still has some of the default settings from before, and so I'm going to actually pull this down here. Oops, I don't want to do that. Let me create that rectangle right here. All right, now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to grab the color black as my fill, and then I'm going to move this rectangle, make it a little bit smaller. If I hold the option key, I can sort of resize both sides at the same time. Quick little trick for you. And then I'm going to put this thing, I want it right overlapping a little bit. I actually want a little bit, I don't want it symmetrically aligned on the bottom right there. All right, so all we have to do next is add some text. I'm going to grab my type tool right here, and I'm going to do this in basically 3 different text point texts or text boxes. So I'm going to write, let me undo that here. Let me try that one more time here. I'm going to grab my type tool and I'm going to drag a text box. I'm going to write regional, like so. Now I'm going to center this text, and then I'm going to also center align the text box right here. And I want to make this text, I think I'm going to make it around 64. I might have to adjust a little bit, so it's 64. And then I'm going to use a font called Montserrat. And I'm going to use Montserrat Bold. I think that looks kind of cool. You'll see that I'm going to eventually choose a contrasting font for the logo that's going to go up in the circle. I'm going to bring this up using my selection move tool right in here. So that's, sorry, this is my select tool right here. I'm just going to sort of center that like so. Now what's cool about vector graphics is I feel like this rectangle is a little bit too big, or a little bit too tall. It's actually decent from a width standpoint, because I want to add character spacing or tracking, which is going to increase the space in between. I'm going to bump that to 5, just gives everything a little bit more room to breathe, and temporarily pull this rectangle down a ways. And then I'm going to take my subselect tool and I'm going to grab this corner, and I'm going to hold shift and grab that corner, and then I'm just going to bounce this up a little bit. So I'm just using my up arrow key, and now I can grab my text. I'm going to bring that up just a little bit, and then I can bring this rectangle to here, and I need to create another text box. This time it's going to say sports team. So I'm going to click one more time. This is sort of like point text. All right, sports team. Select that all, add some character spacing, and then I think I want this to be about 24, and I might come back and adjust that in a second. Maybe let's bump that to 32, make that bold, and then I want this to be the color of the inside here. And so I'm going to click off of it so that I can move it up here. You'll notice like I can't see it because it's the same color as this rectangle. So I'm going to change the fill, and I'm going to use the eyedropper tool here to select this particular color gray. I actually like the placement of sports team, but the rectangle is a little bit high, so I'm going to select it and just arrow key it down a little bit. Just sort of, everything in graphic design is like fine tuning and tweaking. Another tip or technique is to sort of zoom in and zoom out, because logos should look good big and they should look good small as well. So if I start to lose resolution, sort of lose detail, that might encourage me to make some other changes. Okay, so we need to add the S in the middle. I'm going to grab my type tool, click one more time. I'm going to make just an S for, sports team. This would be like the letter of whatever your team name is. And for this, I'm going to choose a totally different font. So it's like going to highly contrast, this regional and this sports team area right here. I happen to know that there's a cool one called, I think it's called Stalinist in here. It's sort of a funky, there we go. There we go, Stalinist 1. Cool looking at S. Now, I'm going to show you a tip and technique that you can use when you are using text, and that is to right click, and I'm going to convert this to a path, similar to what we did with the rectangle early on. And so now instead of this being text, it is a shape. And so I'm going to actually skew this. I don't like the ordinary dimensions of it. So I can make this a little bit taller, and it's a vector graphic, so it's going to look good big, it's going to look good small, and I can make it a little bit wider. Get this thing centered, use my smart guides to do so. I can't rely on the horizontal centering right here. I need to sort of eyeball it here, and this is where it comes in handy to sort of zoom in and zoom out. Oh, I like that. That looks nice. One thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So 64, I should be able to just up arrow key it a little bit. And I think 68 is the right size font. It'll bounce it up like 1 pixel. Okay, now last step. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to right click. My mouse is not the best. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to group everything. Let's see, why did that not work? I'm going to select everything, and then I'm going to group the selection, because that will allow me to center it horizontally and vertically on the page. So once it's grouped, these work relative to the artboard. So now this thing is centered square in my artboard. So now I've got this cool logo that I could use for a variety of purposes. If I wanted to, change the colors, I could do so just by adjusting the fill settings. You would have to right-click and then ungroup the selection so that you could isolate one thing at a time, like the fill color here. If I wanted to make that, something different, I'd have to sort of select that individually. I don't want to do that for this demonstration right now. Okay, so let me bounce back here, full screen mode, camera. That is the project. Once you have finished it, make sure that you save it, and you're gonna save it, both to the cloud storage as a Gravit file, but then also save it as a JPEG. And I'm gonna actually bounce back in to show you how to do that. So back in Gravit, you'll go to File, and you'll go to Save. You'll make sure that you save it into your MyCloud, give it a unique name. I'll hit cancel for right now. And then we're gonna go to download file, and then that will allow you to download it as a GV design file. But actually, I take that back. We don't want to do that. We want to export this. We're gonna go File, Export as a JPEG. And so this is where you're going to export it to your desktop or your downloads folder to submit to Google Classroom. Okay, now that is the end of the project. Best of luck. Enjoy this one. Hope you have fun. See you later.